Hello and welcome to the World Chess Championship match. This is game 5 and we have Fabiano Caruana with the white pieces. The challenger from the United States of America, rated 28-32. And with the black pieces, the reigning champion Magnus Carlsen from Norway, rated 28-35. So this is game 5. This is the third game that Fabiano has the white pieces. And in a way, it might be important for him to strike in this game because Carlsen will have two whites coming up in games 6 and 7, and actually 3 whites in the next 4 games. Because at the halfway mark, they, switch the order, so Carlsen gets a lot of whites all of a sudden. But okay, as in games 1 and 3, Caruana opens with e4. And as in game 3, I was expecting e5, but for the third straight game, Carlsen goes c5. And why not? He didn't have any particular problems, certainly not in game 1, which he should have won. Game 3, he had some temporary problems, but after that, he took over the initiative and was even slightly pressing. And we have a repeat of games 1 through 3. Until this point, in games 1 and 3, Caruana took on c6, doubling the pawns, but in this game, he castled. Bishop g7 from Carlsen, a logical move, the most common move by far. Rook e1. Now white has ideas of pushing e5, which would restrict this knight, restrict the bishop. So black plays e5. And if you're familiar with the so-called bottom setup, most likely black will continue with knight e7, he will castle, play d6, etc. A very solid setup. But here, this is where the chess world got some hope. Finally, some exciting stuff. Caruana, he went for it here, he played b4, going for a gambit. So, obvious pawn sacrifice by white. There are 2 ways to capture: pawn takes or knight takes. Turns out that Magnus Carlsen had played this game before against Daniel Stelvagen in Kxc in 2005. And in that game he took with the pawn. C takes b4. If you take with the pawn, white will continue with a3. And here black has to be careful. Best move is probably what Carlsen played in 2005. He played knight g7 and developed. If black were to take, white will turn this into a full gambit. He will give up a pawn, but have a fabulous bishop here. Bearing down on this diagonal, this bishop can enter here on d6 and really clamp down on black's development. So Carlsen in game 5 here, he decided to deviate and he took with a knight on b4. But this did not faze Fabiano at all. And he responded almost immediately with bishop to b2. So it was clear that this was all prepared by Fabiano. And now black has some problems with this e5 pawn. He can't play d6, it's not a legal move because of the pin here. And you can't retreat with a knight because I will just chop it off, and the problem with the e5 pawn remains. There are some games where black played queen c7, protecting the pawn, but Carlsen went for a counterattack. He played a6. So he leaves this pawn, but of course he's attacking a higher priced piece, the bishop on b5. And Caruana, he responded with a counterattack of himself with pawn to a3. So both parties are attacking a piece, and now we have a trade. Carlsen captures the bishop, Caruana takes the knight, and now with the tension between the rooks, we have to trade. So rook takes a1, and bishop takes a1. So if we take stock after all of this, both sides have 7 pawns. But what remains is the pressure on the e5 pawn. So how are you going to deal with that? I actually do apologize. Black has 8 pawns, white has 7. This was a pawn sacrificed by white. But Carlsen decides to, well, protect the pawn on e5. But in doing so with pawn to d6, he gives up the pawn on c5. Now why does he do that? He wants to get his king to safety. He has an undeveloped king side, and after knight e7, he is getting ready to castle. So he doesn't mind a continuation like pawn takes d6, queen takes d6, and then castling, as yeah, he will have good development. And as we mentioned many times, the all-important bishop pair. Well, Fabiano came up with a powerful continuation. He played queen to e2, activating his queen and threatening to take on b5 with jack. So now if we castle for black, of course we take the pawn on b5, and white will be up a pawn. So Carlsen decided to hold on to the pawn. He played pawn to b4, but now queen c4. And still, Caruana was playing quite fast, so Carlsen fans might have been a little bit worried at this point. Again, we put the pawn under attack. But despite Carlsen having spent some time, most likely he was spending it because this was part of his preparation some while ago. So he had to spend some time to just try to remember the details, not mess anything up. You know, there's preparation that you do before the match, and there's preparation that you do like immediately before the game, something you expect during the game. So you look at it before the game and it's more fresh in your mind. But the lines you looked at like weeks or even months before the tournament, you have to spend some time to try to remember them. And this is logical because, well, Caruana knew he would play e4, so he could check the lines. So most likely he was better prepared. But Carlsen found the move here. He played queen to a5, and this of course protects the pawn. But it does give up the d6 pawn, and of course Caruana took it. What else? Otherwise black would just take on c5 or castle and be just about fine. But c takes d6, and looks like some minor inconvenience for black, but Carlsen had it all under control. He played bishop to e6, first attacking the queen. And this was the first moment in the game where Caruana had to have a think in the game. So probably the first original move of the game by Caruana. So game on. Both sides on their own. Caruana played queen to c7. He doesn't really have a choice because, well, this bishop is hanging. And we have a trade here. Now knight to c6, of course, protecting the e5 pawn, which was under double attack. And now white's main problem is the bishop and the knight here on b1. It's not easy to get the knight out, and the bishop isn't particularly useful. So Caruana decides to play c3, trying to open up squares for the knight and increase the scope of the bishop. Since we have an endgame, like many times before in this match, king d7 is a logical move, which Carlsen played. There's no need to castle here. We don't need shelter for the king. The king is absolutely fine in the center of the board, and that's exactly what Carlsen did. Now play remained logical. Having played c3, of course, Caruana took on b4, getting some squares for his knight and increasing the scope of the bishop. But now another good move by Carlsen, rook to a8. So at the moment, after white having sacrificed the pawn in the opening, black is actually temporarily down 2 pawns. But having said that, of course he's going to win this pawn almost immediately. We have bishop to c3. Okay, this pawn is vulnerable. So Caruana elects to defend it, and now king takes c7. So black is down a pawn, but Carlsen has the infamous bishop pair. Here, knight g5 was an option. It's nothing serious for black. You can play a bishop move somewhere, even king d7, and you don't have to worry about white taking on h7. It turns out that in the game, Caruana was more worried about getting this knight out, so he played d3, creating a square for this knight. And this is maybe sort of the critical point of the game. Despite being a pawn down, black does have the bishop pair, very active pieces, open a file, and the potential of making this b4 pawn a weakness. And most people thought, including the computers, that Carlsen should have played b5 here. And the point of this is to fix this weakness. And this is quite readily and quite easily attacked. I mean, you're going to play rook a4, maybe f6, put the bishop on f8, and you already have 3 attackers on this pawn. Most likely you're going to win it, and you're going to have a passed pawn on the b file and the bishop pair, and some chances of stealing this game, getting a black win, which would have been quite critical in the match. But Carlsen did not play b5, he played king b6. Perhaps he was worried about b5 closing avenues for his king to enter the position. And from b6 he thought, okay, he could play the king to b5. From there he can put pressure here. Maybe in some endgames you can think about penetrating with the king. So he's trying to keep his options open. But here Caruana found a very good move. He played bishop to d2. Now this is a weakness which Carlsen shifted his attention to with rook d8. But bishop e3 check wins a vital tempo, checking the king. And now another piece comes out, knight c3 check. Okay, white gives up the pawn, so now material is equal. But now knight d5. And the king feels the heat a little bit. Carlsen takes, but now rook b3 check. King c3, and the pawn of b7 is it's going to fall. And we have this pressure on the 7th. This pawn is under attack, and if we can get that, then this is these guys become vulnerable. So knight d8 seems like a forced move. Rook c7 check, and king d3. So now, despite Carlsen being a pawn up, he is not better. He has some problems. You know, the knight is stuck defending a pawn. He has all of these pieces lined up on the 7th, and white has no problems. He can you know, increase the pressure with the knight. He can at some stage maybe put the bishop here, put pressure on the knight. And here he calmly played king f1. And I was thinking about g4, which would cut off the king completely here. So Carlsen played h5. h3 renews the threat of playing g4. And here Carlsen decided to yeah, just go for the simplification. He doesn't really have a choice. I mean, g4 will come next move, and white has no problems, even a slight edge, if anything. And Carlsen decided, okay, I'll just play king e4, I'll give up the pawn. Knight g5 check, king f5. Caruana has no choice but to take here. Knight takes, rook takes, and bishop interposes the check. And they agree to a draw here. It's 3 against 3 on the same wing. This is completely drawn. I was actually looking at this position during a lesson with some juniors. I took the black side and let the juniors play the white side, and they held it quite easily. They even blundered, but still held the draw pretty easily, which tells you how easily drawn this is. But okay, they are promising juniors. I mean, this probably came out wrong, but yeah, the gist of it is that this is a dead draw, especially at this level, so they just agreed to a draw. Now, game 6 tomorrow, Carlsen white, and then another white on Sunday. Hopefully things will start to happen now. I hope you stay tuned for the solution to the last puzzle that I posted on the last World Championship video, and I will also post a new puzzle. Stay tuned for that, and give me your solutions in the comments if you can figure them out, and I'll see you soon. Bye bye.